Born Digital: Challenges and Strategies for the Curator. When you think of archives, floppy disks probably don't come to mind. However, diskettes in shoeboxes are donated, and despite their hard-shell exterior, they are more fragile than newsprint. My first introduction to the Born Digital goes back almost 2 years ago when I attended a conference for library staff hosted by the University of Minnesota Libraries. I was blown away by a lecture given by Mark Lanterman, CEO of Computer Forensics Incorporated. That was really the first I had heard that what you deleted was more interesting than what you saved, particularly if you were being investigated by law enforcement. He told stories of how every move and interest was recorded on your smartphone or tablet. That lecture stayed with me. How could it not? 1 year later, another lecture piqued my interest. This one at the Rare Books and Manuscript Section pre-conference held in Minneapolis last summer. Doug Reside, digital curator of the performance arts at the New York Public Library, spoke at the last plenary session. But let me explain a few things first. The position digital curator is a relatively new title and position. A digital curator does the same work of a curator: acquisition, preservation, and provide context for an item, but all within the realm of the digital. His goal is to improve methods for preserving and providing access to the Born Digital materials, such as word processor files, digital musical scores, and 3D set designs that are now part of the creative history of most of contemporary works of art. The amazing work that Doug does is due to his unique skills as a scholar programmer, which he defines as a scholar for whom algorithms are an important mode of inquiry and communication for the work in his or her chosen field. You see, he double majored in computer science and English and has his PhD in English. He has become a rock star in his field, frequently invited to speak at conferences, and is featured in professional blogs. The story he told began in 2008 when he started examining the 180-plus floppy disks from the Jonathan Larson estate. The manuscript for rent was contained in a format that was practically obsolete. He found a MacBook G3 Wall Street edition, an emulator, and a few software tools I hadn't heard of: a plain text editor and a hex editor. He discovered that Microsoft 5.1 had a unique save feature called Fast Save. I'll read you his description of how that works. Fast Save worked by appending revisions to the end of a file rather than completely overwriting the existing text. Word 5.1 knew to look for those revisions and integrate them into the main text when the file was opened. A text editor, on the other hand, just opens the text as it finds it. When these files are opened with a software tool called a hex editor, though, it's possible to look at the groups of text that represent the revisions recorded in a single fast save. In the slide, you can see an example of a hex editor view of the file with the relevant text highlighted. As he described his work, I immediately thought of a paleographer working on a palimpsest. I'm not the first to make that connection. The term digital palimpsest has already been coined and written about. If you Google it, you'll see the Archimedes palimpsest and the recently discovered work of the great mathematician. Yet that is still a print document using digital means to uncover the earlier writing. A digital palimpsest is created when one of 3 things happens. The storage space becomes more valuable than the text, when the value isn't understood, or when priorities change. The hard drive, tape, or disk is erased and written over, just as parchment was scraped and reused in medieval times. Recovering deleted or erased data has been most utilized by law enforcement. Now we employ these tools to recover more than data. We aim to recover text and context. This is the information enhancement a curator brings to Born Digital donations. Born Digital is a term that has been around for a while, but its impact is just beginning to be felt by curators of special collections. In the world of vellum and parchment, there is a newcomer who is both fragile and sensitive. Unlike her predecessors, she's not built for the long run. Donations are beginning to turn now from boxes of papers and files to hard drives and disks. Another term currently in use is media archaeology. Initially relating to film media, it now encompasses a greater range of media. Laurie Emerson of the Media Archaeology Lab describes the field this way. Media archaeology is a wonderful and deliberately frustrating field because it's not clear what the overall methodology is, what its precise parameters are, or even what its driving philosophy is. It does find its roots in Michel Foucault's The Archaeology of Knowledge, in which Foucault thinks through the archive as a system that governs discourse. I understand it to be a term that encompasses the recovery work of digital forensics as well. Jussi Parikka, adjunct professor of digital culture theory at the University of Turku, Finland, in his blog, Cartographies of Media Archaeology, is one of the major voices in media archaeology. Media archaeology needs to insist both on the material nature of its enterprise, that media are always articulated in material, and the non-narrative frameworks, whether technical media such as phonographs or algorithmic such as databases and software networks, and that the work of assembling temporal mediations takes place in increasingly varied and distributed network of institutions, practices, and technological platforms. More simply stated by Laurie Emerson, while recovery is necessary to have a rich sense of our cultural past, media archaeology has a theoretically complex understanding of archaeology that, again, comes out of Foucault. For a certain branch of media archaeological thought, history is a shifting practice of uncovering the ways in which media themselves, in a very physical, concrete sense, engender and delimit what can be said and what can be thought. I share this with you so that you can see this burgeoning world just beyond digital humanities, librarianship, and IT. Who knew Born Digital material had its own field, research labs, and new theories that are being developed in Berlin, Finland, and Colorado? Yeah, me either. So, for those of you with a philosophical bent, the question has been raised. Is there a difference between Born Digital and digitized? Born Digital is a work that is created digitally, such as a Word document. Digitized is something that has been scanned, right? Trevor Owens of the Library of Congress disagrees. He asserts in the Library of Congress blog, The Signal, that the line is blurred if we consider that in digitizing an object, we are making creative decisions about what we are making. What traces of the original will be represented onto the digital version. The discussion portion of this blog article was robust as practitioners weighed meaning in their own projects. One in particular makes the point well. The end goal is the same, to transfer off the original source in order to preserve. Someone else references Doug Reeside, that he sees digitization as part of acquisition. Another participant discusses purposefulness, the intentions brought into the process of digitizing versus the starting purpose of a born digital. Purposefulness. If there is a field replete with purposeful people, it is ours. Librarians, curators, and archivists bring meaning and context to every item and lay a trail for others to find our treasures. How we approach born digital donations will determine workflow and the degree of backlog we wish to create. When we transitioned from analog to digital, few thought of long-term preservation. Access and retrieval no longer required a secretary or an archivist. We believed it was all right at our fingertips. Curators Brian Coe and Mark Wolf at the University of Albany, New York, argue that the lack of infrastructure and the notion of self-archiving is part of the failure of institutional repositories, and I'll add the rest of us creators to that assessment as well. The call for curators and archivists to reclaim the role of collaborator is growing in the literature as we seek to educate creators in the ways of preservation. Doug Reside's advice is to prepare projects according to widely accepted standards, divorce raw data from changeable interface trends, and to centralize data in a collaborative, preservation-friendly repositories. If it is not possible to use open software, creators also need to learn their computer software preferences and workflow in order to recreate the environment to view their work. So the work of the curator begins long before the transfer of masterpieces to the archives. It begins by forming relationships in the art community, by providing education and support for the work that they do. Curators Coe and Wolf write about their experience in collaborating with a willing partner, their university photographer. Photographers are adept in data management, but lack the eye towards preservation and long-term access. The first item to amend is the 7 to 10-year lag from creation to transfer to the archives. By closing this gap, there is no need for digital forensics. Storage is a huge concern for photographers. The digital negative is the emerging new standard for raw data, the DNG, yet it requires twice as much space as a TIFF positive. Yet it is this DNG that is the most valuable because of the loss that occurs with compression in other formats. Proprietary raw image files, like their counterparts in print, become obsolete in short order. Once a standard and a storage plan is determined, keep essential metadata with the items by utilizing the embedded metadata function. The DNG file that allows the most information and has a sidecar that stores information related to the edits made to the image, such as cropping and color correction. It also holds a checksum for each image, a marker that will flag corruption. At this point in the process, Coe and Wolf suggests that the photographer creates a TIFF derivative of all the raw files and describes the events for the embedded header. The files are transferred to a dedicated server, open only to the photographer and archive staff. The raw files are stored offline, and the TIFFs are loaded for use on the digital archive management system. The raw files are still cumbersome to read and unsearchable. Software such as Adobe Bridge and other Piware helps with collection processing. So by working together at the point of creation, priorities can be set for storage and sharing standards. In doing so, reduce costs and create more product to share, echoing the work of Green and Meisner's More Product, Less Process from 2005. Workflow issues can be compounded by various creators using different proprietary tools. Catherine Pierce writes about her time as an embedded archivist in an architectural firm. Conferences and conversations have been occurring for years over issues of information management in the US and in Europe. Yet dealing with both digital and print final copies in a business setting, doesn't facilitate long-term preservation considerations. When archives receive their best work, how is the relationship maintained between the two? And what tools will be required to view their work? When those questions are not considered, there will be the repeat of NASA's Apollo 11 error. While the mission to the moon was successful, the mission to preserve it was not. After an exhaustive search, it was determined that the original high-quality film had been erased in order to record something else. Lots of copies keep stuff safe theory held true, and low-quality footage was assessed, restored, and enhanced using modern technology. The Government Accounting Office in the 1990s reported that NASA was not properly safeguarding valuable data from past missions, and this includes lack of backup systems, lack of security, and environmental conditions that could enhance degradation of the materials. While the scientific data may become obsolete, the cultural and historical information remains important context for understanding the times. These examples, I hope, shed light on the fact that decades of cultural heritage are at risk. Partnering with creators is a good first step. Partnering with IT, our bedfellow in the information technology world, can be more challenging than you might think. Aaron Larimore of the University of North Carolina at Greensboro looked into this and discovered that our shared language hides alternate meanings and values. Words like archive and context. In IT, according to the OED, archive means to transfer to a store containing infrequently used files or to a lower level in the hierarchy of memories, especially from disk to tape. To archive something is to move it out of sight, just as you would clean up your inbox. But for an archivist, there is a purposeful selection and organization that occurs as part of that process. Context, for an archivist, is the organizational, functional, and operational circumstances surrounding the material's creation, receipt, storage, or use, and its relationship to other materials. So context is an essential part of our work with records. Valuing context means we value provenance, original order, and a collection as a whole. IT, on the other hand, sees records in isolation. Values and priorities have to be discussed, not assumed. The risk-adverse archivist or curator is now dealing in a field that faces loss when technology rapidly evolves or when data is transferred. By collaborating, IT professionals help archivists develop workflows that adapts to change, letting go of a perfect end in exchange for getting work done before technology takes another leap. As I read about these challenges, the song from the musical Oklahoma ran through my mind. Oh, the farmer and the cowman should be friends. This still leaves us holding a shoebox full of diskettes. Ben Goldman of the American Heritage Center sets out 4 steps to take in order to responsibly preserve the material we have promised to care for. First, inventory what has been donated. Second, estimate the number of bytes in order to prepare for storage space. Now double or triple that number to allow for archival masters and the access copies which must be stored separately. This is where your relationship building with the IT department pays off. Goldman suggests for the cash-strapped institutions to purchase external hard drives in the short term. The next step is key. Get the contents out of their container. Assess what you need in retired legacy machines and hardware. Third, capture authenticity when transferring data into storage. Goldman advocates for a reasonable and doable approach. Following the spirit of metadata standards such as the International Research on Permanent and Authentic Records in Electronic Systems, some essentials would be to record all action taken on born digital items, including their checksum. This checksum would reflect any tampering or deterioration that might occur. Keeping a spreadsheet with this and the date captured, the cataloger, as well as any provenance information available, will expedite your work, instead of coding each item meticulously. Fourth, develop policies for future acquisitions and their preservation. There is a selection process that occurs with print items prior to donation. The problem with born digital items is that a data dump is a real possibility. One policy suggestion from Goldman is that your institution utilize a USB flash drive or external hard drives to transfer material directly from the donor's computer. This eliminates dealing with physical media. Another is to receive donations at regular intervals instead of at the end of a career. Just like Doug Reside and Cohen Wolfe, emphasis is placed on initiating a relationship with the creator closer to the point of creation. This preserves material that would otherwise become obsolete. Yale has developed guidelines based on Inter Pares 2 called Creator Guidelines, Making and Maintaining Digital Materials, Guidelines for Individuals. Your institution can adapt this and give to potential donors. Goldman's last piece of advice is to add a statement in the deed of gift authorization regarding born digital material. I give consent to the center to digitally reformat the collection or migrate existing digital content to new technical environments as appropriate for preservation and/or access purposes. In closing, born digital donations require the curator to capitalize on relationships with experts in the field, developing fluency with their language, and employing theories of our trade: acquisition, preservation, and access. These are exciting, groundbreaking times for those who are willing to go beyond vellum, parchment, and newsprint in order to responsibly preserve the most fragile items of all, the digital. Thank you.